In this video, we're going to add Spring Security to our project, and we could have added Spring Security at the time when we were creating our Spring Boot project initially. For example, I will go to Start Spring.io, and when I was creating my project, I could have provided a dependency. It has a hint here, Web Security GPA, so I could have typed security, and when this project was created, with Spring Initializer, the Spring Security dependency would have been added to my POM.xml. But since I did not do it, I can always add Spring Security dependency entry into POM.xml by copying it from Maven repository. For example, I'll go to mavenrepository.com, and here I can type Spring Boot Security, for example, and hit enter. And that will find me Spring Boot Security Starter. Click on the version that I need. 2.0.1 is the one that I would like to use. And here's the dependency element that I can copy and paste into my POM.xml. So let's go to our development environment, and I will open up my project, and I'll open POM.xml. I'll switch to the XML view, and I will paste a couple of dependencies that I need for my Spring Security to work. So the first one I will copy from here, and I will paste it after MySQL connector, and I will remove the version, and this is because the version for my Spring Boot starters is managed by the parent version element, and I will format this. Okay. And this is all I need to add for my Spring Security to start working. If I build and run my project right now, all my web service endpoint will immediately become secure, and I will not be able to access them publicly as I used to do in my previous video. And I will show you what I mean. But since we are adding Spring Security to our project, and since we are at the POM.xml file, let me add one more dependency element which I will need to be able to communicate with my RESTful web service. And I'm talking about a JSON Web Token. So I will add JSON Web Token right under the Spring Boot Security Starter, and I will format my code. I will not go into details about JSON Web Token at this moment. We will talk about generating tokens and working with tokens a little bit later. At this moment, let's just add it, save it, and rerun our project, see how it works now. So I'm going to run this as Spring Boot app. And I'll notice when my application started, I have a security password generated here. And I'll show you how to use it in just a moment. So now when my project has started, I can go back to my Postman client, and I can send HTTP post request to my users to be able to create a new user. And now when I send the request, I get back 401 HTTP header which says unauthorized. If I move mouse over, I can read a little more about this HTTP header, but basically I'm no longer authorized to communicate with this web service endpoint because it is now secured. And if I were to access the URL through the browser window, I would have to provide the password. Let me, for example, go to a browser window, and then I'll open a new tab, and I'll copy the URL to my web service endpoint, and that will be HTTP GET request, for example, to get user with some ID. And now if I hit enter, I'm provided with the login form. So the URL to my web app became protected. And if I provide the password that was generated, I should be able to log in and get access to that web app URL. So the user should be just user, and the password is that secure password that was generated when our app started. And I click on login, and here we go. I am now authorized, but I do not have a proper mapping for my users /user ID. I get an error. But if I'm to go back to my web service entry points, and if I open Java folder, and then I open controllers, and I open user controller, I have post mapping, boot mapping, and delete mapping. So for the get mapping, I have an entry point that doesn't accept any parameters. So I'll go back to my browser window and I'll delete this and hit enter. And now I get a proper response. And this proves that we were able to successfully add Sprint Security to our project. And we can now continue and use Sprint Security to encrypt user provided password so that we can store encrypted version of the user password into our database.